today is D-Day. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger having, shown their decision to leave ECOWAS. So it used to be 15, take 3 out, that's 20%. Now we're left with 12. What does the future hold for the sub-region, the West African sub-region, really? We're joined on the program by Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, Niger's former ambassador to Switzerland and permanent representative to UN in Geneva. Joins us via Zoom from London. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the Morning Brief.
Yeah, good morning. Morning.
Well, I know for residents or citizens of these countries, they are already jubilating. They're celebrating 1 year since the exit, but as per the provisions in the ECOWAS law, they've given them 1 year grace period to see if some sort of negotiations, conversations could be had to perhaps make them reverse that decision. But what is now more important is what the future holds. President Bola Tinubu overseeing ECOWAS, and this happening during his term. Well, Guinea had previously been suspended anyway, and I wonder, what does this mean for the sub-region? Does this change anything materially? Is this a wake-up call for ECOWAS? Is this going to mean maybe worse reality for the countries leaving and one staying? What do you foresee?
Well, thank you. Well, of course, when there is a break in a relationship, there is always a worry, especially as what led to it was not necessarily, it wasn't exactly a friendly breakup, I would say. There were pressures on the part of these two countries, and they felt that they weren't doing any good. Their relationship, the existence within the ECOWAS system was not necessarily protecting their interests. Of course, that was their perception. Anyway, the ECOWAS, of course, felt that they had gone awry with regard to the political values. That's the democratic dispensations. So the background is important. The three countries feel that they have specific shared interests, shared values, especially with security, with their political status now, and so on. That they will look ahead, especially also with their relationship with their former colonial master, or rather, metropolitan country, that's France. These misgivings must underline what happens from now on, at least for some time, depending on, of course, how it's managed. The fact remains that these countries are still part of the sub-region. That you say you are living doesn't mean you of course, you cannot live physically. So all the things that determined the relationship in the past and why they all became part of ECOWAS are still there. There are still interactions, trade, cultural relationships with the rest of the ECOWAS. They are still there. So at the end of the day, it boils down to how it's all managed. As much as possible, it should not be seen as the end of the world or for both sides. It just calls for a new approach, new approach to whatever the issues are. If you think of the economic trade relationship, which was the background. Yes.
Truth is, these states, these countries jointly contribute just about 8%, less than 10% to the GDP of the ECOWAS sub-region in that sense. I know ECOWAS was meant to achieve a lot of things, lots of plans, not just trade, security, but the point they raised, and I think you talked about that, is that, well, ECOWAS has not been able to, at least their own perspective, help with the insurgency and terrorism that has displaced millions, and lots of people have died. So for them, they evaluated it and said, this is not working for us. Why should we keep carrying on as though it is working and deceiving ourselves? So they came up with the AES. So in that sense, would you say ECOWAS, do you agree with them or disagree with them? Has ECOWAS been effective, particularly for that pain point, insurgency and terrorism?
Well, I don't agree with them fully. The point is, let's take the security issues. It's still an ongoing challenge. It wasn't because of a specific failure in the ECOWAS structure. Even they haven't left. There is no guarantee that they have found a solution to the security challenges. I believe that the security issue is what would have been would have addressed, all working together, because they are in a specific position, really, up there in the Sahel, especially where the security challenges are coming from, to really make a lot more input. That wasn't the real reason for their breaking out. But what one would hope is that, having separated or gone away, that the issue of security is still a collective regional challenge of ECOWAS, and the two groups will be working together still to deal with them, especially with regard to the security challenges.
So, Ambassador, beyond the security challenges, let's look at the stability of democracy itself on the continent, particularly when viewed within the context of celebrations in these countries by their citizens about the significance of today. So where lies the legitimacy of ECOWAS and its efficacy in ensuring democratic stability on the continent, particularly if we have not yet exited that coup scare on the African continent?
Well, there are various divergences now. We must admit that when we talk of democracy, it could mean all sorts of things. When these countries that broke up look at ECOWAS, they would find some challenges. They would find some worries that even the concept of democracy is not truly what it is. So they're not worried about democracy itself. Of course, I guess that at the point they should, because you have a military coup after some time, and of course when you do, there is a groundswell of support, and if the coupists will think they are representing the people, but gradually this fades away. We've all had that experience, and that there will continue to be a demand for democratic dispensation. They think that what they have now enables them to deal with their challenges, and of course ECOWAS will need to go back to the drawing board and they take the issues of political reforms, democratic rules, and so on, a lot more seriously, so that they will be in a position to really demand democracy from other countries, especially the AES countries, and so on.
Ambassador, let me build on Bukola's question. Yeah. And if you were to give an exit note to Burkina Faso, to Mali, to Niger, what would be the content of that exit note? You've mentioned some things in passing. We've not seen a timeline, because the way this coup was, the response of ECOWAS to the coup is also another kettle of fish that may have triggered the reaction in terms of ego and power game. These are military men. There's a way they understand how these things play out. So if there was a footnote, if there was an exit note, what will be the content? Because we can tell, given examples of what has happened in Africa, there are possibilities that instability may not have exited the door.
Well, if of course a footnote or a note is, well, I would say take it easy. You have broken out. Democracy is still the best way ahead. The euphoria you feel you enjoying people out in the streets healing you will fade. Of course, at the end of the day, it has to do with the type of governance you deploy. At the end of the day, we call it dividends of democracy. It is expected that if you do well, the people will continue to support you, and that it shouldn't be a timeless. There has to be timelines. It shouldn't. I would, of course, tell them to begin to think of when they would finally hand over to civilian administration. Not too long, but definitely it should be at the top of their list, because when they don't, then they will slip back into the failures of the past. Where past we had it in Nigeria, you stay too long, then you're no longer wanted, and the military government administration will continue to be.
Yeah, Ambassador, just without trying to cut, because why I asked that question, I don't think we have seen any timeline in any of them, because ECOWAS went from hard rejection to soft rejection, and you see what played out with even Robert Mugabe. That was quote unquote an arguable coup, but it was allowed to stand, whether it's fait accompli or like in Sudan. Mm-hmm. But we're not seeing anything that suggests that these guys are ready to exit anytime soon.
Well, yes, that is the current reality. One would expect that gradually it will change. I would suggest that we will give them some time. We shouldn't. I don't think it's some solution that we will reach within 1 or 2 years. We can anticipate up to 5 years. But then, at a certain point, there has to be, insinuations or suggestions that they should start having timelines. But you can't force them. If you force them, then they might even tip overboard. So it's a delicate balancing act. I would say give them time. Simple.
All right. Let's expand the conversation, Ambassador. We have joining us Mr. Adamu Garba, Global Affairs Analyst and former APC presidential aspirant, joining us virtually from the nation's capital, Abuja. In fact, he's in our studio in Abuja as well. Mr. Garba, welcome to the morning brief. Just get right into it. Do you sense a certain fatigue with all these political unions and global treaties in that sense? You see Trump sort of withdrawing from the WHO and having that stance that says, well, us first, all of these, thieves to us, I'm going to pull them off. And now you see countries like, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali celebrating 1 year, even though there's a 6-month grace period that has been given. But my point is this, do you sense a global trend of a fatigue towards all of these unions and alliances, since a lot of them look at it and say, it's not working anyway for us?
Well, this is the trend that is happening. You can see immediately on coming of Trump, there are a lot of reorganization, and even before he comes on board, there are so many threats and constant threat in the international alliances. You've seen NATO itself is under threat, due to some of the pressures they are facing from the US. And you can see also when France was openly against United States, when the US decided to create an AUKUS, Australia, New Zealand, those alliances that are designed to contain China within the East and the South China Sea. So when you look at all those kind of configuration, it is actually the trend that is also cascading down here into Africa, where you've seen that so many people are demanding for new reorganization in order to contain certain specific interests. So what is happening in ECOWAS is not altogether disconnected from this issue, except the fact that most of the global organizations are demanding for reform that will carry their interests. If you see what even Trump is doing, especially, he's asking Canada, which is his neighbor, on tariff, just to negotiate new term that is beneficial to the US. So a situation whereby you are enabled, like ECOWAS, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, they share, of course, borders with Nigeria and so many other ECOWAS countries, and then decided to pull out directly a kind of a hard decoupling without demanding for reforms that is obviously needed, then this is not actually a good thing, but for them and for us, and most specifically for them. I want to tell you the truth that actually Nigeria tried. Nigeria showed a very serious leadership in the crisis. People like us were one of the first set that decided to start asking Nigeria to stay action when there was this declaration that military will invade, and ECOWAS decided to declare that military will invade if they don't come back at the beginning of the crisis. We stood up and insisted that this should not happen because we saw it as a trap that could boomerang into very serious political consequences and also insecurity challenges. But eventually Nigeria actually carried this leadership, extend very good hand. We have people-to-people level diplomacy that was extended to them. We also have military-to-military level diplomacy. We have intelligence-to-intelligence level diplomacy. And so despite the propagandization that they have been anchoring from their own side, Nigeria kept quiet and still keep pushing through the diplomatic channel, because one of the biggest trouble you will have, a very sleepless problem, is to have a neighbor that is not happy with you, is to have a neighbor that is trying to erect a wall between you and him. So what they are actually doing is much more even injurious to their interests. And I think the action they are taking, this hard decoupling, is actually not the right thing to do in a very serious environment where tension is right. Today we have about 35 conflicts happening in Africa. And most of these conflicts are as a result of this kind of internal wranglings and disagreement. To some degree, sometimes that doesn't make sense. That plays to the interests of the foreign powers that benefit from this. Almost all the major rivers in Africa, the River Nile, the River Congo, and the River Niger, all the countries around these areas are in crisis. So a situation whereby we have some new government that emerge, militarily in these countries, and they are trying to do a hard decoupling, erecting massive walls between them and the neighbor that is very strong like Nigeria, and then also trying to propagandize against Nigeria, despite Nigeria keep extending an olive branch in every way, including a lot of coordination that took place, especially during COVID, where we have West African Health Organization, WAHO, that did a lot of effort due to ECOWAS coordination strategy, whereby this region in the whole of Africa recorded the smallest amount of death due to COVID challenges because of the ECOWAS protocol regulation and also organization to contain this kind of pandemic. So there are a lot of benefits that they're supposed to anchor. But when they decouple, you have 132 staff of these countries that are working in ECOWAS today. And these staffs earn up to $6 million per annum to their countries. I know these Francophone countries, we do businesses with them. There's a business we did in Togo that is just $2 million. It takes us nearly a month to liquidate the money because they hardly get forex. So these staffs alone give them up to $6 million per annum. And a situation whereby you want to just decouple, I think it is not a very good picture. But as the ambassador said, it is important for us to keep pushing for this. It is important for us to keep pushing for.
Yeah, Mr. Garba, I'm just wondering whether, ECOWAS later reapproachment to those countries, prevailing on them to stay within the organization, anchored on the initial stance, that really coups are not to be tolerated on the continent. We stand for democracy. I wonder if it's not a sort of recant, when you later go and prevail on these countries to stay and even give them a grace period. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the sentiment echoing from these countries is that ECOWAS has lost its relevance and it's now becoming a hindrance to development on the sub-region itself. So what is the future of the efficacy of the organization itself when you consider this, and the fact that these countries have now decided to align with countries like Russia and Turkey and have, turned their back on France? What are your thoughts on these myriad of issues surrounding the exit of these countries?
You see, the protocol establishing ECOWAS, one of the charter is that military coup is not going to be tolerated. And wherever there is military coup, the other bodies will come and ensure the restoration of civilian administration. But there is no gainsaying, there was no gainsaying that ECOWAS need massive reform. Because if you look at its formation in 1975, it's a culmination of so many activities that happened in the Middle East regarding the energy crisis that took place, and as a fallout of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. So that is why most of these organizations are now reorganized, most often at the instance and the influence of the foreign powers. And that's why, countries like Nigeria were pushed to, and Togo, to come together and form this ECOWAS in order to contain the international geopolitical realities at that time. So it has served its purpose effectively for those periods, but now there is desperate need for reform. And it is not a bad deal if ECOWAS can consider massive reform to contain this interest. Because if you look at what they are doing, they are pushing themselves based on ideological inclination about the rising geopolitical tension that is happening globally. As you say, the alliances with Russia, with Turkey, to some degree with UAE. It is the kind of drama that we are seeing still happening in Sudan, where you see the two generals are fighting. One part is fighting to protect the interests of Turkey and Qatari and Russia, while the other part is fighting to protect the interests of the Saudi and Egypt, all of them killing themselves while their resources is being exploited. It is the same issue we are seeing today in Democratic Republic of the Congo, where you have the M23 rebels supported by the American companies, while the current government in Kinshasa is supported by the Chinese. And it's not disconnected with the fact that immediately you see the crisis is rising very high, you see the DeepSeek and OpenAI are in competition, because most of the resources that come to power these AI machines are actually extracted from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And now, if ECOWAS continue to take a hardline stand, especially both the two sides, both the AES and the ECOWAS began to pull a hardline stand, the River Niger belt will also see the kind of consequences that is happening in Sudan and in Democratic Republic of the Congo at the expense of the life of the citizens of these countries, while the foreign powers continue to exploit.
Well,
so what we should do is to accept reform, because in history,
certainly, that picture you paint, we're totally out of time, but I think that's a great place to anchor, Mr. Garba. We don't want a situation where it's now 3 against 12 and the whole sub-region is in turmoil. We have to thank you so much. I've been speaking with Global Affairs Analyst, former APC presidential aspirant, Mr. Adamu Garba. I like the way you drew some of the inferences into other regions as well as a global scale. I would like to thank you so much, Ambassador Joseph Ayalogu, Nigeria's former ambassador to Switzerland and permanent representative to UN in Geneva. Thank you for always giving us your insights.
Thank you.
We'll take a moment now. A lot of conversations happening around the world, but what's going on with the stock market? There's a lot of other issues we're going to be taking a look at on the show this morning, so stay with us.